Societies are often confronted by many problems at once. Because of this, they have to prioritize between problems. They have to determine which problems are the most important and deserve the most attention. This process of prioritization is carried out by the political system of a society. In the United States, this system includes voters and elected officials, as well as political parties and the media. Political systems, however, don't always do a good job of deciding which problems are the most important. They may focus on minor problems, or even imaginary ones, while ignoring some of the biggest problems. In this video, we're going to examine this issue of prioritization. Let's start by looking at some of the reasons why political systems do a bad job of prioritizing problems. There are many factors that can lead to bad prioritization. One of the biggest is the effect of money. Money enters the political system through a variety of ways: donations to campaigns and super PACs, lobbying, funding of think tanks and activist groups. As a result, money is able to affect the outcome of elections, sway public opinion, and influence how politicians think and act. Sometimes the effect of money is overt, and sometimes it's subtle, but the effect is very real and it impacts many political issues. Psychological factors can also influence how political issues are prioritized. One of these is that humans tend to ignore problems that don't have immediate consequences. This is true for individuals and society as a whole. It means that we often ignore the long-term consequences of our actions and put off dealing with important problems, leaving them for others to fix in the future, often when they've become much bigger problems. Another important factor to consider is the effect of the media. The media obviously plays a big role in determining how we prioritize problems. They have significant control over which topics receive attention and which don't, and they have a strong influence over how people perceive various issues. Unfortunately, media institutions are often subject to bad incentives. As businesses, their primary goal is to make money. This creates the tendency for them to make viewership the most important value, sometimes at the expense of other values. The biases and personal motivations of people working within the media also create problems, as does the fact that media companies are often part of larger corporate conglomerates which have their own priorities. These influences are often in conflict with principles that many journalists value. Principles such as being honest, accurate, focusing on the most important and relevant issues, and being fair and balanced. The result is that there is a constant struggle between these positive and negative motivations. Sometimes good journalism wins out, sometimes it doesn't. The way our political system prioritizes problems is distorted by these three factors as well as many others. What can we do to change this? How can we make sure our political priorities reflect the reality of the problems we are facing? The first thing we can do is be aware of these factors that have a negative influence and work to resist them. We should fight to end the influence of money in our political system. We should be aware of our psychological limitations and resist the tendency towards short-term thinking. Instead, we should focus on creating a better future. And lastly, we should call out the media whenever they abandon the principles of good journalism. Beyond this, I think we need to take a step back and approach the issue of prioritization from a fundamental point of view. We need to start by asking, What really matters? I think most people can agree that the most important value in an individual's life is well-being, or happiness. Given this, I think it's clear that the most important value in any political system should be well-being, and the goal of all political activity should be to increase, or at least maintain, people's well-being. What this means is that we should prioritize problems based on how they impact people's well-being. One of the most significant failures of well-being is death, both for the person who dies and for the people around them who suffer from their loss. Because of this, the political issues that involve death should carry the greatest weight, and the problems that cause the greatest number of deaths should be given the highest priority. We need to focus first on solving the problems that cause the most deaths. So what are the problems that cause the most deaths? War is definitely the first on the list. Obviously, a nuclear war would be one of the worst things that could happen to humanity. It could cause more deaths than almost anything else. Even without the use of nuclear weapons, war is extremely devastating. This is why war, and more specifically, how to avoid war, is something that should always be a priority and something that we should always be thinking about. State oppression is another very serious problem. States have great power, and when they decide to turn that power against their own people in political purges, in racial genocides, or for any other reason, the result is usually a massive loss of life. Another big problem is that of food shortages. They can be caused by droughts, economic depression, economic warfare, or war itself. When food shortages occur, they often affect millions of people. They increase sickness and disease, especially in children, and people often die or suffer long-term negative health effects as a result. Climate change is another potentially terrible problem that we face. If it's not clear, the reason it's such a big problem is because of its potential to cause massive disruption and destabilization, which could ultimately lead to many deaths. This could happen as rising temperatures cause famines and make certain places uninhabitable. This would lead to mass migrations, growing poverty, and possibly even war. These are some of the most extreme problems that we face. They deserve our constant attention, and we should do everything we can to prevent or fix these problems. There are other problems, however, that are also very important, but are often overlooked because they are a different type of problem. To see this, we need to take a look at statistics. This is a chart published by Our World in Data. There is a link below. About 2.8 million people die in the U.S. every year. The two leading causes of death are cardiovascular disease and cancer. Problems like these are often overlooked in the political realm, but as you can see, they are still very important. In addressing these types of problems, we need to keep in mind that at this point in history, we cannot eliminate all of these deaths. People are going to end up in one of these categories eventually. All we can do is try to reduce the number of premature, preventable deaths. Cardiovascular diseases account for about 900,000 deaths each year in the U.S. According to a study by the CDC, around 200,000 of these deaths could be prevented with proper care, and this may even be a significant underestimate. These deaths could be avoided if people ate healthier diets, exercised more, managed their blood pressure, and avoided smoking and excessive alcohol consumption. All of these areas, when neglected, contribute to cardiovascular disease. These are simple and effective solutions to the problem of cardiovascular disease. They are simple in the sense that they don't require new technology, scientific breakthroughs, or significant resources. However, they are challenging to implement because they require people to change their behavior, and behaviors are often very difficult to change. The main thing we can do is promote education about cardiovascular disease, what causes it, and how to prevent it. Right now, we are failing to do this. It's the number one cause of death in the US, but let me ask, when was the last time you heard anyone address this issue? Just as a reminder, eating healthier means limiting salt, fat, and added sugar consumption, eating more vegetables and fruits, and having a diverse diet. Take this seriously, as it's one of the most important things you can do for yourself. Another important thing to consider is the role of poverty in cardiovascular disease. Numerous studies show that low-income Americans are significantly more likely to suffer from cardiovascular disease, and they are more likely to die from it. This is in part because they can't afford basic medical care. A simple visit to a primary care doctor could let someone know that they have high blood pressure and are at risk of dying if they don't do something about it. This could save their life. But without this basic medical care, they remain at risk of dying. That's why ensuring that everyone has access to health care, regardless of their income, is so important. It could save tens of thousands of lives. Often, there are several approaches to solving a problem. Usually, the best solutions are the ones that are easy and simple. In healthcare, this often means that preventing problems before they arise is the most efficient solution. This is true for cardiovascular disease as well as cancer. Cancers cause about 700,000 deaths a year. Like with cardiovascular disease deaths, many cancer deaths could be prevented. With cancer, there are three main areas that people focus on to reduce the number of cancer deaths. First, developing treatments and a cure. Second, increasing early detection. And third, prevention. All of these are important, but the area of prevention is probably where the biggest improvements can be made. This is because it is the simplest approach and because it has largely been neglected. Around 45% of cancer deaths can be attributed to modifiable risk factors. This means that they could likely be prevented if people made healthier lifestyle choices and if environmental dangers were reduced. Many of the things that are effective in preventing cardiovascular disease are also essential to preventing cancer. Things like healthy eating, frequent exercise, not smoking, and not drinking too much. Eliminating exposure to radiation and hazardous chemicals, especially in work environments, is also very important, as is reducing air pollution, which contributes to cancer. Cancers are far easier to treat when they are small and haven't spread. This is why early detection is so important. Unfortunately, many people cannot afford the basic medical care that would allow them to detect their cancer at an early stage. As a result, people with lower incomes are significantly more likely to be diagnosed with late-stage cancers, and subsequently, they are more likely to die. This situation is made worse by the fact that people with lower incomes are also more likely to have delayed or inadequate treatment. All of this, again, points to the necessity of establishing universal healthcare coverage so that whether a person lives or dies is not determined by their income. Dementia is another leading cause of death. It's a progressive disease that gradually reduces a person's cognitive function. It mainly affects the elderly. Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. People die from dementia when complications arise due to their loss of brain function. For example, they may suffer falls or stop eating and drinking. In addition, people with dementia are often more susceptible to infections, especially pneumonia. There is currently no effective treatment for dementia, but there are a few things that appear to be helpful in preventing it, such as being healthy and being socially and mentally active. Respiratory diseases kill around 200,000 people a year. Common respiratory diseases are COPD, asthma, and cystic fibrosis. Respiratory diseases are often caused by smoking and air pollution. However, some are caused by other factors, such as genetics. Not all of these problems are equally capable of being solved. In general, we should focus on solving the easiest problems first, because those are the areas where we can make the biggest improvements with the fewest resources. An example of this principle can be seen in the case of road fatalities. There are about 44,000 deaths each year due to accidents on the road. There is a very simple solution to this problem, and that is self-driving cars. The technology is already moving in that direction, so it would be relatively easy to implement. Around 90% of these deaths could be prevented if we did this. But it matters how quickly this transition happens. If we push to make all cars self-driving as soon as possible, we will be able to save many lives. If it takes 5 years to achieve this, rather than 10, around 200,000 lives will have been saved. And again, it would be relatively easy to do because this is where the technology is already going. We just need to make sure that we push for this to happen as soon as possible. We can do this by supporting research and development and establishing requirements for car manufacturers to begin including self-driving technology in their new cars. You may have noticed that among these top causes of death, many of the underlying causes are the same. For example, smoking can cause cancer. It can also cause cardiovascular and respiratory disease. These underlying causes are known as risk factors. This chart shows some of the top risk factors for death. Among these are high blood pressure, high blood sugar, and obesity. These highlight the importance of healthy lifestyle choices like diet and exercise, which are essential for reducing these risk factors. The large impact of smoking is also made clear from this chart. Air pollution, drug and alcohol use are also important risk factors. At the beginning, we covered several factors that disrupt how we prioritize problems. There is one more factor that I want to look at now. This is that people tend to focus only on the problems of the people that are closest to them. This happens at multiple levels. First, of course, people think about themselves. Next, they prioritize their families. Beyond this, they may focus on local communities, churches, or other groups that they are a part of. Then comes their country and their fellow citizens, and last comes humanity as a whole. Often this hierarchy leads to us ignoring very important problems merely because they affect people who are distant from us. These are the leading causes of death for the whole world. The total number of deaths per year is around 56 million. As you can see, many of the same causes of death and risk factors are predominant. Cardiovascular diseases kill about 18 million people a year. Cancers, about 9.5 million. High blood pressure and smoking are the top two risk factors. However, there are important differences when we look at the global picture. These differences highlight the disparities between low-income and high-income countries. First of all, many problems such as cardiovascular disease, smoking, and air pollution are much worse in low-income countries. In addition, low-income countries are dominated by deaths from highly preventable causes. Deaths from malnutrition and problems with pregnancy are common. Rates of infectious disease are much higher and much more likely to kill. Often, hunger and poor sanitation are the underlying causes in these deaths. What's so tragic about this is that so many of these deaths could be easily prevented. Simple actions like ensuring that people have food to eat, clean water to drink, and sanitary living conditions could save countless lives. Providing even basic medical care would save even more. Ensuring that everyone has access to these basic necessities needs to be our highest priority. We can help by providing direct aid, but we also need to invest in long-term solutions. We need to support low-income countries by helping them build infrastructure for clean water and stable food supplies. We also need to help them build housing, hospitals, and schools, which can train doctors, teachers, engineers, and scientists. By investing in these fundamental areas of society, we can help these countries and their people build themselves up. It's important that we support this work as individuals, but we also need to support it as a society, because many of these things can't be accomplished by individuals alone. Only with large-scale, organized action can we make real progress. This should be our highest priority because this is how we can have the greatest impact and save the most lives. And doing this work will provide benefits for everyone. The world will be more stable, the economy and trade will be able to flourish, and maybe one of those people who we help now will end up developing a cure for a disease such as cancer, which could end up saving your life or the life of someone you care about. This is how we make the world better for everyone, by helping others and lifting them up, so that together we have the strength to overcome all of our challenges.